The first Devil May Cry game was a success for Capcom that sold about 2 million units during the PlayStation 2's life, with the popularity of the first game booming the hack and slash genre and the many possibilities that the Sparta family yielded in though, it only made sense that Capcom would want to capitalize the franchise, which, they did. The result for the follow-up, however, was,
My gun! Anyway, I started blasting. Bang! Bang!
What happened? Ainda sugarcoat it. Devil May Cry 2 is not just a bad follow-up to the original, but a bad game to play. I know it, and if you've been on the gaming sphere on the internet over the last 2 decades, then you most likely know about its infamy. I played through the game multiple times for this video, one on normal mode with Dante, one on hard mode with Dante, the newcomer to the game Lucia, and I played a bit with the unlockable character Triss, being that I may have a different take on the game, but with a few playthroughs I came to the conclusion, as the majority of people who have openly talked about this title. The story is dull to watch, with certain plot points that don't go anywhere, like the old lady knowing about Sparta, Dante's charisma being drained out of him as the old director thought Dante was too goofy, the lack of fanfare when you get a new weapon, its large but empty environments in the majority of missions, and the combat being dull as guns went from tools to supplement the combat to outright being the combat. The combination of the overpowered guns, enemies that aren't as aggressive, and the large but empty environments makes this combat incredibly easy, even on hard mode, and while I enjoy my easy games, this one felt outright boring. This was apparently because the original Devil May Cry back in the 2000s was criticized for its challenges and tight spaces, which I felt was overcorrected. Also, the producer of DMC2 mentioned in the Gamespy interview just before the game was coming out was that it had a stable system that adjusted difficulty to suit your ability, and if you're not doing well, for example, the game might produce fewer enemies, which I'm not sure if they cut it out just before release, but I did not notice this. I think the only time I died was one of the last bosses on hard mode, but it probably because I was spacing out. I think the biggest sin of DMC2 is that it doesn't feel like Devil May Cry. I don't go out of my way to go and review games I know I already dislike. Well, maybe except this one, but I think even games that I found out that I didn't like, I can still appreciate them in some way, like Persona 3 with its persona customization, its overall aesthetic, and its introduction to the time management and social links to the franchise. However, with Devil May Cry 2, I can't say much that's already been said to make a whole video on it, which is why I'm not going to. Deciding whether to review Devil May Cry 2 was one of the reasons why this video took so long to make. I will say, at the very least, the game did introduce things that will become a mainstay in the series, like Bloody Palace and enemy gauntlet mode that you must survive in one go, as well as the multiple characters that were included. Triss herself isn't too bad to play, as being just Dante from the first game, with lightning bolt powers that annihilate bosses. Devil May Cry 2 also lets Dante double jump from the get-go, which unfortunately the latter games do not. He is rocking the yurt being my favourite design in the series until 5. The most important thing, however, was that it marked the first time that director Hideaki Itsuno worked on the series that changed the perception of what made the series so great, and I want to point out what makes Devil May Cry 3 the true sequel to Devil May Cry.
Wanna know the name? Devil May Cry.
Firstly, I do want to talk about the development of Devil May Cry 2, as it's important to talk about how Itsuno was involved with the series. Like I mentioned in the first part of the retrospective, Hideki Kamiya and his team were involved with the first installment. However, they had no involvement in part 2 of the Dante saga, with the exception of the motion animator Hiroki Nara. This decision came from the higher ups at Capcom, as well as the producer of the first title, Shinji Mikami. Mikami wanted Kamiya and his staff to have the creative freedom to work on more than one title. However, Capcom wanted an immediate sequel, so Devil May Cry 2 was given to Capcom Studio 1, who at the time mostly worked on arcade titles, which were at the decline after the millennium, at least in the West. Kamiya mentioned that he had a habit of delaying his games prior, which might have been the reason why Mikami suggests working on other titles, as he apparently got annoyed at him when he did delay them. Kamiya didn't even realize that a sequel to his creation was greenlit until one of the planners came up to him and asked for design documents. Despite not working on the sequel, it allowed Kamiya and his staff to work on original titles like Beautiful Joe and Okami. Kamiya even said that if he stuck with the series, he probably wouldn't have the chance to work on those games. One of the best things DMC2 did was he had games like Okami to exist, rather than Kamiya being trapped doing the same series like some other developers nowadays. Without the majority of the original staff's involvement, it led to newcomers to work on a game that they were unfamiliar with, plus with a huge crunch time, led to an unsatisfying sequel with plenty of ideas scrapped. I'm surprised that it wasn't a complete dumpster fire, knowing some of the development history, which I think some of it had to do with Etsuno's involvement. Before hopping on as the game's director, he was planning on working on Dragon's Dogma, but after wanting to do a second attempt on the franchise, we never got to see it till the 2010s. I'm surprised he wanted to come back after the mess, but hey, DMC2 did well enough to get improved, and I guess he saw the potential. Etsuno gathered a bunch of talented staff who were at the time either unemployed and bored to help make the third title and change how the in-house Capcom games were developed. Communication and a good work ethic was key to DMC3's success, which seemed to be the opposite to how 2 was handled, and if the game wasn't successful, it could be the end of the franchise. But we know that didn't happen. I mentioned in the previous DMC video, but Devil May Cry 3 was my introduction to the series, as well as trying out more games for the PlayStation 2 and onwards. To this day, I'm still a fan and want to show why Devil May Cry 3 is one of the best games on the PlayStation 2. The team decided to go back in time, seeing Dante in his youth, who was as charming, stylish, and goofy as ever. In fact, all his personality was amplified to match his age compared to the first title. You can see his carefree, wild, and undignified personality in his design, whereas in 1 and 2 where he seems to care about his appearance with his suit, his design in 3 looks like he threw things on wearing nothing but brown trousers, combat boots that aren't even tied, and his iconic red jacket that he throws on. Makes sense since he literally didn't have time to get prepared, as he was swarmed by demons destroying his office right at the beginning, sent by the villains Arkham and his twin brother Virgil. Virgil summons a tower in the middle of the city to link a portal between the demon world and the human world, but to complete the ritual he needs Dante's amulet, so he lures his brother to the tower. During Dante's ascension, he meets up with Lady, a demon hunter who swore to get revenge on her father after murdering her mother. She is by far my favourite female character in the series, mostly due to her relationship with her father Arkham and Dante, tying the themes of dysfunctional families and what makes someone human. Lady is also such a badass. For being a human, she can handle herself well. All the previous titles touch up the message of what it really means to be human, but I think this one handles it best so far, and I think it's because I care about the characters here due to their high charisma, making the emotional moments hit a lot more. Lady herself hates demons, believing it led to the death of her mum as well as to sending her father into madness, so her attitude towards Dante is bitter at first. What makes her more interesting than Triss or Lucia is that while she grows as a person throughout the story, she also aids Dante into becoming more mature and human, having similar backstories. The two main villains, Arkham and Virgil, are such great foils. Arkham is a human, but he's by far the most evil out of the bunch, showing that even humans can be monsters, while a hero is seen to show compassion despite having devil's blood in him. Virgil is a great rival to Dante, showing some similarities in terms of strength and pride, but different in terms of appearance and personality. Devil May Cry 3 throws in the classic red and blue Oni trope, literally with Dante being the red one, as he's shown to be wild, enthusiastic and rebellious, while Virgil being in the blue, shown to be stoic, calculated and cold. Their appearances also match their personalities. Like I mentioned before, Dante's appearance is more rugged, while Virgil is dressed a bit more smart, with his shirt buttoned up and his hair pushed back. Both of the Sparta children share the same backstory, with their mother killed by demons. However, while Dante eventually chose to embrace his human side, Virgil leaned into more of his demon side. Belief and power will make him able to protect the ones he cares about, making sure the same thing doesn't happen to him like what happened to his mum. The question is, who is he protecting? Is it himself? Or is it someone else? This is unfortunately unanswered, but I assume it's himself. It's probably in a drama CD or a manga, but it's not shown here. Props to the voice actors and the voice direction. While Drew Coombs did a decent job in the first game, Ruben Yankton nailed the character perfectly, which is sad to hear considering he no longer voices it. Adam D. Clark makes Artem sound so cold and sinister, and Carey Weldon captures Yadi's anger so well. No, my favourite performance has to go to Daniel Southworth as Virgil. His nasally voice fits so perfectly for his character that I cannot think of anyone to replace him. He has some of the most memorable lines in the game. 3 was the first game in the series to use motion capture that still holds up today, enhancing the story and coolness of each character. I love that the making of these motion capture scenes are unlockable in-game. The staff must have been proud of them, and the actors seem to be having a lot of fun. Some of these shots are incredible, from the very opening with the fight in the rain to Dante riding on a rocket. The animation perfectly captures Dante's wild, cocky and wisecracking personality. It felt like the staff replayed the very first game before development, finding out what makes Dante such a beloved character while going into a bit of depth into the Sparta lore. Devil May Cry 3 is a good example of pseudo-narrative harmony, making you feel like a cool action movie star. While you cannot do everything in these cutscenes, the fact that you can pull Summoner Moth is rewarding. For example, in the first act where Dante is blasting his enemies, while sliding on one of them can actually be performed. The pseudo-narrative harmony can also be seen between the brothers. Throughout the game you fight Virgil multiple times, and being the twin brother of our hero shares similar abilities, only swapping out guns with speed, making him the perfect rival. He even gains access to a weapon similar to Dante during the events of the story and uses them against you. However, while he's shown to be on equal footing, he kicks your ass in the first fight, showing that you have a lot to grow, giving you the motivation to kick his butt by gaining new moves, weapons, and understanding the mechanics. Playable rival fights are some of my favourite tropes because it's a good way to see how you, as the player, can become better over time. Combat has been amped up as Dante has a variety of weapons, each with their own moves. Each melee weapon you get, minus your Sword of Rebellion, are unlocked during boss fights, and before you get your hands on them, you can see Dante use them in a cutscene, giving you an idea what they can do in battle. You have your trusty Rebellion and your Gauntlet weapon, but there's more variety this time around, such as Cerberus, which are a pair of ice nunchucks, and Nevan, an electric guitar that shoots at vampire bats. My favourite, minus the Gauntlet, has to be Agni and Rudra, a pair of dual-wielding swords with fire and wind properties that can come out fast. I pretty much use all of them constantly, minus Nevan, as it feels the hardest to control, mainly focusing on projectiles and setting up space. It's not a bad weapon, however, as I've seen people who use this weapon consistently well. Guns also make a comeback with the return of Ebony and Ivory, as well as the shotgun, and some new toys which return to the role from the first game instead of the second. 3 introduces styles which give Dante extra abilities during combat by pressing the circle button. At the beginning of the game you can select from 4. First, you have the Trickster, which gives you various mobility options, Swordmaster that gives you extra melee attacks on the ground and in the air per weapon, Gunsinger, which gives you multiple attacks for your guns, and Royal Guard, which, if timed correctly, can counter any attack the enemy throws at you. In my first ever playthrough back in 2006 or so, I mainly used the Trickster style as it was the easiest to use, especially as I played a bit more defensively back in the day. 3 was also my first proper hack and slash game, which I was inexperienced with, not fully understanding the mechanics. Over time, I learned to use most of the styles, with my favourite being Royal Guard, which is the most difficult to use, but is hella fun when I put it off. These 4 styles can level up to 3 levels throughout your various playthroughs, giving you extra abilities. Getting to the second level is pretty easy to get to, but maximizing one of them can take a while, and yes, if you mainly focus on the one. There are 2 other styles you get later on, but they don't level up. Unfortunately, unless if you're playing the Nintendo Switch version or mod the PC version, you cannot switch them on the fly, as that was first introduced in Devil May Cry 4. You can only switch between them either in between missions or the golden statues you find in the missions. Thankfully, you can switch both melee and ranged weapons on the fly. No, you can only select between 2 melee and 2 ranged weapons per mission, or open the golden statues. Still, this is a huge improvement, and I'm only nitpicking it because the latter titles and its Switch version lets you do them. You still have a ton of move kits, and along with the game's length, skippable cutscenes, and replayable stages, you will never run out of options. Heck, if you see pro gamers play it, it's like a fever dream. You do start out with the bare minimum, but you gradually get new moves by defeating bosses and collecting red orbs, which are carried over future playthroughs. The only downside with the upgrade system that unfortunately carries over in future titles is that you have to unlock the double jump per weapon. I wouldn't mind if it was just a one-time purchase, but for every weapon, it's a bit much. The style meter returns and works pretty much the same, forcing you to spice up your attack while avoiding to get hit, but with the many tools you have, the combo game is a lot more engaging. There are even these statues that can only be broken with the right style rank and test you with how well you are with each weapon. Enemies aren't gonna let you hit them this time around, as they're a lot more aggressive and diverse, making you earn that stylish ranking. As someone who was new to the genre back in 2006, my first experience was with the original version, which was like getting thrown to the deep end. The original version isn't terrible, but it was quickly replaced with the special edition that was released a year later and has been used for many of its re-releases. The special edition included a rebalanced difficulty, a new harder difficulty, a turbo mode, and a new playable character, as well as Bloody Palace, the mode I mentioned at the beginning of the video. While the difficulty was tweaked, it's still pretty much a challenge, especially on higher difficulties, and with the inclusion of checkpoints, it's a much easier game to get into. I didn't have much trouble on normal and hard mode, but Dante Must Die is on a whole nother level. In Dante Must Die, enemies are way more aggressive, can kill you in a few hits, and have access to Devil Trigger, similar to the player. I played it for a good few hours, and well... There is also a Heaven or Hell mode, which is unlocked after completing Dante Must Die, where both enemies, bosses, and Dante alike die in one hit. Unfortunately, I've never completed Dante Must Die. Maybe one day. 3 has some of my favourite bosses ever, with only 2 stinkers. While the combat is the main attraction, it still retains its exploration roots from the first title, with its Gothic environments and levels that intertwine with one another and like puzzles, which is something I miss in a lot of more modern action games. The new character for the special edition is Virgil, who has become playable in future re-releases of the latter games as well as Ultimate Marvel vs. Capcom 3. He is too good to be in the base games. If Infinite had an upgraded version, he would have surely been there. Unlike his brother, he has only one fighting style, able to use most of his boss moves, as well as teleporting around the screen like a Dragon Ball character. He can, however, select between 3 weapons, his signature weapon being the Yamato, the gauntlet weapon Beowulf, and Force Edge, the weapon Dante uses in the first title. Virgil, however, doesn't use guns, so instead he's able to summon many swords, which he can fire from a distance, or can use as a damaging shield to jettle enemies while performing other moves. Both characters are so much fun to play, as while it has a learning curve, it makes you feel so cool when you're able to beat those tough stages in such an awesome fashion. Replaying Devil May Cry 3 made me realize that you can feel stylish without having big bombastic set pieces or giant kaiju fights. Being cool should be a reward for the player. We have to earn it, and I think that's one of the reasons why I love Devil May Cry. The best sequels usually follow the original's footsteps while improving on things those originals could not do, and I think Devil May Cry 3 does that in spades in all categories. From the characters, presentation, and in gameplay, Itsuno and his team got their second chance, learning what made the original so memorable and improving everything on it. Itsuno would later work on DMC4 and DMC5, spreading the Sparta legacy. DMC3 proved to be a good redemption after the mess that was DMC2, and it got me thinking about other good redemption titles. So my question for the day is, what are some games that redeem themselves after a disappointing or bad title beforehand? For me, besides DMC3, I can think of Mega Man X8, which was a way better experience than X7. DMC3 is one of the quintessential games you have to play before you die, and without it, I wouldn't have gotten into many of Platinum's libraries or the 3D Ninja Gaiden titles. This was my very first Devil May Cry game ever since I left school, and was my gateway going back to the older titles, playing the new ones, and even getting the Madhouse anime on DVD. I'm glad it holds up. It's been a long time coming, and I apologize, this video took way longer than I thought it would. Hopefully it doesn't take too long to talk about the next one.